welcome to the Guardians of Liberty podcast. I'm Caleb. To my right is Ryan.
What's up, guys?
To my left is Steven.
Oi, oi.
How you guys doing today?
Doing pretty good.
I'm doing good. How are you, Caleb?
I'm good. Thanks for asking.
You're welcome, bud.
Today, our topic is going to be the 4th of July. More specifically, we're asking the question, should libertarians take back the 4th of July as their holiday? Or should we just let the statists keep it? Before we get into that question, though, we're going to talk about something that we did recently. It's called the Midwest Peace and Liberty Fest. I'm going to let Ryan talk about that a little bit.
Okay, so yeah, we went down to the Midwest Peace and Liberty Fest in Delta, Michigan, and we didn't really know what to expect. As Steve would call it, it was Ancapistan, to his delight. To probably the folks at the Midwest Peace and Liberty Fest, they'd know us as the Miller Lite Boys.
Oh, jeez.
Because as we drank Miller Lights and set up a tent, and a couple of tents, actually. But, yeah, we camped out, played some basketball. We were the only ones playing basketball.
8-foot hoop.
Yeah. I did find it interesting when we get there and they say, oh, we're first timers, so we felt a little out of place. And they say, well, what brought you here? And, Scott Horton was speaking at the event, and that was kind of the main reason we went. But it turned out to be pretty awesome. And I think we're planning on going next year, too.
I know I'm going just because there's beer pong and Fila. So, Fila, if you hear this, I just want to say that you were the best beer pong partner that I have ever had. I mean, we cleaned house. We really gave it to him. And I'm glad I got to share that with you and share some Crown as well.
All right.
So enough about the Peace and Liberty Fest.
No, actually, I want to talk about it a little more. Ryan, why don't you tell us who Scott Horton is?
Scott Horton is pretty much the most amazing, smartest guy that any of us listen to as far as foreign policy goes. He wrote the book Fool's Errand. He's a head editor at antiwar.com. And he pretty much crushed it. He was given about an hour to speak. It took him probably an hour and a half, but covered as much as he could over the conflict in the Middle East. And he was just an awesome guy. Down to earth, really cool guy to meet. It was a great time.
I was going to take your mic and say, that's how you creeped him out. You kept talking to him and touching him while he was trying to sign your book.
Yeah, you did scare Scott a little bit.
Well, you know what? I might have scared him a little bit. His celebrity was a little bit high for me at the time because I had just read the book and listened to the audiobook. So, but yeah, that and, the Miller Lite thing. But
So we went there for Scott Horton. It was an awesome experience. We also got.
Oh, don't disinclude CJ. We went for CJ too.
I was just about to say that.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
We also got a chance to hear Prof. CJ from the Dangerous History podcast, which was a really cool experience. We actually got him to come hang out at our campsite for a while. Ryan offered him a Miller Lite, so he was a honorary Miller boy for the night.
That's all it takes is just say, hey, Miller Lite's here, and they come running.
Very true. So is there anything else you guys want to talk about as far as the fest goes?
I didn't know CJ. I hadn't actually never heard of him, but he's a cool guy. He came over, started drinking some Millers with us, and he just started talking with us, for a good hour and a half, and I thought that was really cool, man.
He is a cool guy, and we almost got him to come on this podcast today. We had some scheduling conflicts, but we will have him on the show in the future, and we are going to talk about a few things, his thoughts on this 4th of July question. Is there anything else you guys want to talk about as far as the fest goes?
Phoenix, you the man.
Are we going next year?
I'm going.
Absolutely. We're going next year. And I think any of you who want to have a good time should probably go.
All right.
I want to run it back on beer pong with you. And The Economist. You got me in a couple of games, and we still got to play Blackout as well. That was one thing we never got to do together.
All right, 2K19, watch out.
Ayo.
So let's get into the question that we're asking today. Should libertarians take back the 4th of July? We're going to start off with a little bit of history. So The Declaration of Independence, that's what the 4th of July is celebrating. It was confirmed on July 4th, 1776. But I don't really know, Ryan, what do you think? Do you think people view the Declaration of Independence as kind of the start of the war, or what?
I honestly don't know. It was kind of an interesting discussion we had earlier, is that, actually today, July 2nd, is the day that it was approved. Well, not the day that it was approved, I'm sorry, the day that it was unanimously
We're
voted.
recording on July 2nd.
Yeah, we were. So it was the day that it was unanimously voted on by the 13 colonies, but New York had abstained. So, that was the day that it was basically John Adams, who, not that we're big fans of John Adams here, wanted to be celebrated as Independence Day. And then it was approved on July 4th. And then July 8th is when the public was actually made aware. But I think what's more interesting about the whole thing is that, if you really dive deep into the history of it, is that the Declaration of Independence was a little behind the actual resistance movement that we had started. And I mean, if you really think about it, the Declaration of Independence itself was just basically this group of powdered wig guys who were kind of elitist oligarchs that got together. I mean, 2/3 of them or more were actually held positions in the British forces or the British government at the time. So,
at some point in their time. So more to that point is the fact that the revolution, in a lot of respects, had been going on for a long time. The Sons of Liberty in Boston and New York and down south and everything like that had been resisting things like the Stamp Act since the mid-'60s. And it wasn't until 1776 that Continental Congress, finally got around to declaring it themselves. When we were talking to Prof. CJ about coming on the show, he wasn't able to, but he said he was going to give his 2 cents on it. And basically what he said was, if we're being honest, the revolution really started April 19th, 1775. And for those of you who don't know, that's the Battle of Lexington and Concord. He thinks that it might be a cool idea to see if that's something we could make the true Independence Day.
Okay. Thinking about what the Declaration is today and the 4th of July and what it all is today, it's become mostly flags and parading about the state and how great it is, thank the troops, yada, yada. I think it would be much easier if we, started our own holiday. On what day is it?
April 19th, 1775.
Yeah, and also it's right before 420, which is something else libertarians
Good
love.
point. So that's 2 days in a row that could be
two libertarian days in a row we could really take.
That's perfect. Let's get back to this point in a little bit. For now, I just want to say that I think Ryan wants to make this point too. How much sooner was the Battle of Lexington and Concord than the day the Declaration of Independence was signed?
Right. So we've got about 15 months of these people fighting for their lives, basically, and rebelling the state that was, British Parliament, the Redcoats. I mean, you had, some interesting numbers like the city of Boston that harbored had 15,000 people, and then they move in 4,000 Redcoats and basically say, we need you to move in and let you, you have to let them, you have to harbor them essentially, and they're treated as the police force of the region, and it's kind of, I don't know, to me, it's like that shouldn't that point out why that's a kind of a hot rebellion city at that time? But the question, like you said, is, do people look at that as the beginning of the war? Do they look at that as the end of the war? And I almost would wonder if you ask people when the Declaration of Independence was signed, just common Americans today, would they say, oh, that's when we beat the British, or, oh no, that's when we absolutely said that's when we started against them. But in reality, it was the time they finally got around to writing some government document to basically to light the fire.
And that's funny. I was actually talking to this guy on Facebook today. He was saying July 2nd, 1776, Continental Congress resolves to break its ties with Great Britain. 2 days later, the Declaration of Independence is approved. And I said, over 1 year after the people had declared their independence at the battles of Lexington and Concord, government has a long tradition of being slow and pointless. essentially the people had already declared their independence by their actions, by the fact that they were defending their homes from the invading British, by the fact that they were sending their young people to go and die for this cause they believed in. Now, there's a good argument to be made that the American Revolution was pretty much hijacked by the rich, landed, what would you call them? Not aristocracy, but what's the word I'm looking for? Whatever. But the point, it's the rich people, and essentially what they wanted to do.
Elitist oligarchs is what I would call them.
Oligarchs is what I was looking for.
Okay, there you go.
I don't want to make this sound socialist, like I'm talking about rich people. But essentially what these people are trying to do is they wanted independence from Britain, but they wanted it so that they could be the rulers of this country.
And I think a big part of that is that, you have all these people who up until this point respected a monarchy. So, it was a little bit hard for them to swallow down the idea of individual freedom and things like that when, you had the Sons of Liberty running around doing what was deemed at that time extremely radical. So it was really kind of tough for them to swallow the idea. And you had a lot of Quakers. You had a lot of pacifists that really didn't want war. They were just trying to do their own thing. And then ultimately the Declaration of Independence, and even more so, for the actual soldiers and the militia, the Thomas Paine's common sense really inspired the people. So you have a whole group of people that pretty much relied on government for everything. They respected the king. They thought they definitely knew they had hardship. They definitely didn't like, they didn't like the taxes. They didn't like any of the policing that the redcoats were doing. They didn't like any of the stuff going on at the time, but they still held this, like, I don't know how you put it, this respect for Parliament, for the homeland type of thing. This whole like elitist idea that they were the true answer to everything, and if they said whatever they said went. And all of a sudden, this document comes along, and you have a lot of these guys who were from that crowd. And then boom, so take the Declaration for what it is. I mean, it's not a perfect document, as us, ANCAPs would say, but it definitely inspired the revolution for sure.
All right, this takes us into the next part I want to talk about, and that's the document itself and the idea of it being a natural rights kind of document, a kind of manifesto of human and natural rights. Kind of the bedrock of what libertarians believe and what their philosophy is.
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to say. If there was like one thing you could take from this time period, I think it's like the first 100 words of the Declaration. And it's, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it. And that last part right there, to me, I think it makes a great case for anarchy, that whenever the government does become destructive of, your rights, which, as we know, it's like a contradiction to have the government protect your rights, because the only way they can do it is to violate them. So it really does make a case for anarchy right there.
And that's true from our perspective, but I think you could also look at it and just call out the contradictions of the people who are celebrating the Declaration, yet are allowing this tyranny to go on right in front of their eyes.
Right, like it's kind of that whole thing where, we're supposed to be celebrating independence, and if you actually read it, like Steve just pointed out, they're basically calling you out to say that not only is it something you should be aware of, but it's your duty when you see tyranny to kind of step up and do something about it. And yet, what is the 4th of July today? And I'm not trying to jump ahead here, but what the 4th of July today is, to me, is almost just a worship of the state. I mean,
he's trying to jump ahead.
Yeah, I think I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I think it's become where this was supposed to be the greatest holiday. I mean, it's an actual date that you can assign something to, not like Christmas where it's kind of the thing or and Caleb, I always like the point that we make about Memorial Day, give it to the left. Memorial Day, give it to the right. Right. Labor Day, give it to the right or left, and then we have 4th of July. Like, give us that, right? But then when you dive into it a little bit, and you're like, okay, as much as we want to celebrate the 4th of July, I think it's a great thing to kind of like any holiday, celebrate family and things like that. But what we're really doing by just going off and worshiping the flag and lighting off fireworks and doing whatever and trying to, and now it's become kind of almost like synonymous with Veterans Day, Memorial Day, thank you for your service type thing. It's become a worship of the state when, in fact, at that time the Declaration was written, it was so anti-state. It was the opposite of what, I think some of these guys, especially the people who started back on April 19th, would have represented.
Yeah, there's no more infuriating feeling, I guess, than when you do look at what's going on the 4th of July. I mean, the day is called Independence Day, but I think it rightfully does fit into the world we live in today where everything's so fucking confusing and bamboozled that
it's like 1984.
You have a day called Independence Day, but you just have, a ton of people worshiping the state, wearing their American flag, swimming trunks and whatever. And you talk about secession and you talk about, declaring your independence, and these will be the first people to tell you, well, why don't you just leave the country?
All right, so we covered that the Declaration of Independence is a natural rights document, and we kind of covered that the people who celebrate it don't even understand natural rights. Now I kind of want to talk about how quickly things went downhill as far as a liberty perspective as soon as the revolution ended. As we know, the Articles of Confederation happened, and those weren't bad, but then the Constitution was written, and basically you have this revolution of the people, which is now controlled completely by government. That's okay. We're going to keep going.
Tell them what I'm doing. I don't have a mic.
Steve's looking at socialists.
I'm looking at that socialist girl from New York. I think she's from. Man, she's well fit.
Did you see her smile?
Yeah, but even then I think she's kind of, I don't know. Not that picture, but you go into Google, it's like the 8th picture. Google it.
Steve, she's the perfect girl for you. She's a socialist, and she's going to take half your stuff. It's perfect.
Take half my virginity. All right, go on. Sorry.
Okay, so we have the Constitution written. George Washington becomes president. Today we kind of put him on a godlike status. This is a guy who won us the revolution. He's the first president. Is he the one who doesn't tell lies?
Yeah, he's one of the ones that doesn't tell lies.
No, he has wool.
The two of the his teeth are made
teeth.
of wool. Hip Hop Anonymous. No.
So,
yeah, he's one of the ones that doesn't tell lies. Yes.
So
you are right
he's
about
the guy we think about when we think about liberty, which couldn't be farther from the truth. We won't get into all the stuff where Rothbard bashes him during the revolution, how he's a terrible general and all this stuff. But the point is...
But he was.
Wait.
Hang on. Steve has something to say.
Okay, so think about Jefferson, how he's kind of behind the Declaration, and Madison's behind the Constitution, which are kind of like the, things that, most people think when they, associate with, liberty, for, let's say, a Republican. What the fuck did George Washington do? Why is he the one that's the most popular?
He was the first president.
He was the guy that was handpicked, the Virginian elitist oligarch. I'll use it again. That was handpicked and I think in part because he was handsome, and they actually thought those powdered wigs were handsome. Believe it or not.
Did you see that ugly motherfucker?
Yeah, I mean, seriously, I get rid of all the dollar bills in my pocket. I'm not gonna say where, but I get rid of them.
I was gonna say I do for all the wrong reasons. All right, but seriously, it is kind of weird to think about. You think that Jefferson or Madison would be the most important ones, but for some reason, I think everybody does associate George Washington with liberty.
But it's that dad thing. It's that creepy thing. You want somebody who can take care of you. All that weird stuff.
Well, and he was handpicked. You got to remember, he was handpicked, and one of the coolest quotes
for the generalship.
He was handpicked for the generalship over a guy named Charles Lee, who was ugly by comparison, at least what we're told. And I think
he was British.
So, but he was a much more successful military commander, and I think people look at George Washington today and they think of him as this you hear the old stories of him being basically bulletproof, but he was terrible. I mean, terrible. And we don't have to get into it in this show, but we could actually do a whole episode on Washington's military, his military career and how terrible he was, especially in the early parts of the war. He tried to adopt what the British were doing and went away from guerrilla warfare, which was extremely successful at that time, and basically chastised Charles Lee, when he was more successful.
Okay, so kind of the point I wanted to get to with Washington was We didn't even get through the first presidency when already there was a rebellion because of taxation reasons. It's called the Whiskey Rebellion. And basically these farmers didn't want to pay the whiskey tax, blah, blah, blah. And how does this hero of liberty, George Washington, respond? He sends an army, I think it was 13,000 people, to put down this little armed insurrection. To give that context, the United States or the Americans, the colonists, however you want to say it, never fielded an army that large during the Revolution. So already, as soon as this country was formed, they've already gone full statist.
And that's a point you can make about small government, I think. It's really a case for anarchy, and a good point that anarchists should use, that through the first president, you already violated the Constitution. It didn't even make it past the first president. So you know how everybody always says, like, real socialism has never been tried. That's why the joke about, well, real small government has never been tried, because you're starting to see that, like, even small government fails eventually. Like, America started as the smallest government, and look what it's turned into.
I like the quote by Lysander Spooner. The Constitution has either authorized such a government as we have had, or it's been powerless to prevent it. Which just speaks to it all. Like, I don't know how you could argue against that point. So we see that right away, liberty is kind of getting just destroyed by the state. Then we see the Civil War less than 100 years later. We see people like Woodrow Wilson, FDR, 50, 60, 70 years later. So now let's kind of get to where we are today and kind of get back into how people view the 4th of July and just kind of what it looks like today.
Well, I think, what it looks like today is hot dogs and beer and, going out on the lake and fireworks and all that good stuff, and
there's nothing impressive about fireworks in 2018.
Caleb hates fireworks apparently, but me and Steve, we like blowing shit up. So, but yeah, I mean, it's hard to say there's anything inherently wrong with celebrating the holiday itself, because of what it's become. To me, it's like, if you're asking me personally, what I think of all these, quote unquote hallmark holidays is that it's time with family, and should you abstain from it because you're so sour about something that happened 200 and some years ago? No, probably not. But I mean,
it's what's happening now too.
Yeah. And that's like we touched earlier, the fact that, it's become almost become a religious holiday. If guys like us believe that the state is a religion, and it definitely is, then yeah, it's become a religious holiday, and what should be worshipped as independent, or should be thought of as independence, gets worshipped as this state, just basically a representative for statism. The whole date itself, everything around it. I mean, it is sad.
Here's something I've kind of noticed. I can hardly tell the difference between Memorial Day weekend and the 4th of July as far as how it's celebrated here in Michigan, where we're from. Memorial Day, they go out on the lake on boats and say, "Hoorah, America." On the 4th of July, we do the exact same thing. I can't tell the difference.
But dude, remember when we went on the lake on the 4th of July a couple of years ago, and we
No.
literally got fucking kicked off because we didn't have enough lifeboats or life vests on our boat?
The water police.
Like, the fucking police literally kicked us off a private lake because we didn't have enough life vests. I think we were like 2-3 short.
Yeah, we had like 10 people on there. We're just celebrating freedom. Like, we
Yeah,
were pretty
but,
innocent
yeah.
as far as it goes then. And then,
This day we're supposed to celebrate independence and freedom, and we get fucking kicked off a lake by the police, man. It perfectly sets up what the 4th of July has become.
and they had nothing better to do.
No wonder you guys became anarchists.
I think the most important thing we can take away is the words from the Declaration of Independence, and try to spread that message as much as we can, let people know what the holiday is about. But I don't think we're ever going to take it back. I don't think the 4th of July will become a libertarian holiday, just because how much statism has gotten into people's minds. And like you said, it's almost like a fucking religion to these people.
That's true. And I kind of listed out, like, what should we as libertarians do about it? And I kind of said, who cares? Should we just have the attitude of, like, fuck it, let's just go out and have fun, enjoy our time, which I think is a very legitimate option.
I like to do that.
Should we protest it? Should we say, like, I'm not going to do anything, I'm not going to celebrate at all because I'm totally against this? Probably not, in my opinion.
No, I agree. I mean, I don't necessarily think we need to.
I won't even wear blue though, just so you know.
Yeah, Caleb won't even wear his Captain America T-shirt, and that's, if you know anything about him, that's a big deal.
I just don't want him to get it confused.
Yeah, you don't want to give anybody the wrong ideas. You know what I'm saying?
That's right.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, we definitely shouldn't. I don't think we need to hide ourselves in a hole and tell everybody that this is a bullshit holiday or anything like that. I mean, I guess, enjoy your holiday. Have some fun, drink some beer, do a hot dog eating contest, because isn't that what it's all about?
To me, the hot dog eating contest is the most libertarian thing about the 4th of July.
Can you explain why, please?
It's people pursuing their own self-interest. It's human action. It's free market economics. There's nothing inherently patriotic about it. And I can sit at home while everyone's on the lake and try to match them dog for dog.
Yeah. We know you can't do that, but yeah, I'd like to see you try that.
Come over.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely it's become what it's become. It's a statist holiday that we all have the day off, so we might as well enjoy it, right?
Right. And so the other two questions here, should we also use it as a chance to educate people?
Well, I was going to say, if there's one thing we should do is throw our own little Liberty Fest where we all talk about independence, secession, and we break away from the government and its rules and do our own fucking thing.
Right. Which also brings us to the other topic. Should we celebrate it on April 19th and why?
Well,
the
yeah.
Battle of Lexington and Concord, like we talked about earlier.
Well, I think that would be its own thing entirely. I think if we did the 4th of July, I think it is important to take the Declaration of Independence in those words and just remind people what it's about. But I don't think we're actually going to change anybody's mind. But also for libertarians,
one person at a time, though, maybe.
Well, you could, but I think you could do your own thing too. Really, I just want to play beer pong with Fila again.
Oh, geez, Steve. I think if there's anything we can do, I don't say move the date or anything like that, but if there's anything we can do and celebrate the holiday on the 4th, like everybody else, be normal people, so to speak. But what I would challenge everyone to do is read the Declaration of Independence. And I'm not talking about, the first 100 words like we talked about on this show. I'm talking about read the grievances that they had with Parliament, read all that stuff, and you'll find, and not only just read it, but read it and relate it to today, and look at what the grievances were that when they wrote the Declaration of Independence, and try to correlate it and compare it to what we have today,
what
with
our
the
government's
state,
doing
what our
today.
government's doing now. And man, if you actually read it with some heart and mind into it, I have a hard time believing that you're just going to go, yeah, that's okay. I'm still going to go out and, worship the state, because you won't. There's absolutely no doubt that if you actually take a deeper dive into what it's one of those sacred documents. It's like the Constitution. It's like the Bible, and it's one of those things that most of the people that have vehemently defend it, they have never read a part of it. So I say go ahead and read it. Read the Declaration of Independence, especially the grievances portion, and compare it to what's going on today, and then tell me how much you like the fireworks.
Unfortunately, one problem that we would have today is that the left would read it and they'd probably agree with it just because Trump's the president. But then, a couple years ago, the right would have read it and probably agreed with it because Obama was the president, and that's sort of the religion of the state too.
Right. We can switch that to our advantage, though, and this is something I wanted to talk about and we really haven't yet, and that's the idea of secession. We can get this in people's mind, and obviously people anti-Trump are going to be more into secession now, and when Ben Shapiro's president... I'm just kidding.
That's awesome. We endorse Ben Shapiro.
No, but the point
Sorry,
is...
Ben.
Say, Oprah Winfrey becomes president, the right's going to be pro-secession again, and that's just kind of the flow it goes. But if we can get this in people's mind that secession can be them living out the life that they want to live, I think that'll be a big step in the right direction.
I think, and I think if we're staying on topic here, I mean, wouldn't the first, I don't want to say state, but the first individual to bring us towards actual secession from the state that we have now, the federal government, wouldn't they be the ones that were following the Declaration of Independence instruction? I mean, wouldn't they? I mean, based on everything we've talked about, based on everything that's pointed out there, I mean, how could you say somebody? I mean, even right now, you have Trump as president and California wants to secede. If they weren't a sanctuary state and based on, and had so much public funding, they probably would. But so I see it more being like something like Texas again. But what are you gonna do? I mean.
So I think the point you're trying to make is if Steven spit in a police officer's face, that would be in the spirit of the Declaration of Independence. Is that what you're getting at?
You're damn right. Steve, are you going to do that? Can we video that?
That'd be aggression, and we're actually against that.
Okay, well, all right, fine.
My spit would make him fear for his life.
It's like venom or acid or something.
We should just delete everything and make that the only quote.
We could put it on a T-shirt.
I do want to get back on topic, though, about Ben Shapiro. Have you guys seen the meme where it says, Mom said you guys have to find a 3-player game? Yeah. I'm glad Ben Shapiro's he's getting memed because the whole, like...
peeing with his pants up or something.
Nobody heard that, Ryan.
No, I am over the whole Ben Shapiro because I'm over people mistaking him for a libertarian when his foreign policy is pretty much shit.
Gosh.
So I'm glad that there is a little bit of pushback against Ben Shapiro now. But okay, we can get back to the Declaration. And
I think we've kind of done a good broad overview of the topic. Is there anything you guys want to add to it?
No, I was just going to say that if we can get this,
so there is something.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. If we can get that intense about just the Declaration and the old powder wig elitists, imagine what we could do with the idiots we have today, or the geniuses. I don't know, whatever you want to call them.
So you're saying tune in for another podcast?
I mean, Caleb, you're selling it like a terrible car salesman, but yes, that's what I'm saying.
Slaps the hood.
Slaps the hood. Did you like what you saw there? Well, under this one, we got this.
I want to talk a minute about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
And that's where we wrap.
We might cut this off. We'll see.
I think she's well fit.
Is that socialist?
Yeah.
Now, there's a lot about her. Maybe we'll cover it on a different time, but they say she comes from old money.
The way that she's going to win is through the hearts like mine.
If you guys don't know, we all approach libertarianism from a different perspective. Ryan from the center, me more from the right, and Steven was kind of a socialist.
How am I from the center?
All right, I pissed him off.
I thought we were talking like I was attracted to someone in the Liberty movement like Ron Paul.
We're going to cover this later. All right, that's all for today.
Bye.